Lisa Scottoline is the New York Times bestselling author of 32 novels. She has 30 million copies of her books in print in the United States and has been published in 35 countries. Lisa also writes a weekly column with her daughter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Lisa has served as president of Mystery Writers of America and has taught a course she developed, Justice in Fiction, at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, her alma mater. She is joined tonight by her daughter, Francesca. Francesca Serritella is the New York Times bestselling author of a 9-book series of collections co-written with her mother, bestselling author Lisa Scottoline, and based on Chick Wit, their Sunday column in the Philadelphia Inquirer. She graduated cum laude from Harvard University, where she won multiple awards for her fiction, including the Thomas T. Hoops Prize. Ghosts of Harvard is her first novel. Thank you both again for joining us. We are so excited to have you here tonight. I don't want to take up any more of the time, so I'm going to let you guys jump right into your conversation.
Thank you, Victoria. Yes. This is so fun for us, and thank you everybody for being here. This is good. This is a family affair right now, guys, and you guys are family. And I just wanted to say something at the outset, which is a big first thank you to RJ Julia. We love RJ Julia, and why I say this is a family affair for us is that, as you just heard this wonderful introduction, Francesca and I have written these memoirs that are funny memoirs, and we have signed at RJ Julia and Bookhampton for almost every single one of them. And we love the stores. We are so grateful that they have us, that they support the community. They are wonderful, wonderful, among the best independent bookstores in the country. So for me personally, I just want to say this is really a really special signing because I'm talking to my favorite author in the world, Francesca Serritella, and just give me a moment to say that I adore her. I love her. You will too. She's just
we are related. You have to love me, to be fair.
And she has written, having written these 8 memoirs together, she was 9. Okay, right. That's right. We forget that. She has all that time been working on her first novel, which is Ghosts of Harvard. And it is just wonderful. The reviews were amazing. I will say to you, I'll show the cover, then I'll stop. But this is a proud mom moment because it's also a sensational novel. I loved it. Also, International Thriller Writers nominated for Best First Novel, which is as good as it gets. I'm so proud of this book. I think it's so terrific, and I'm so proud of her. And I'm just really happy that we could be here all together tonight, and we'll talk about our books. But I wanted to start off by saying how special this signing is because it's you, honey, honestly.
Oh my God, Mom, you're too sweet. I'm going to like almost verklempt. I mean, I second every single thing you said about RJ Julia. We have just some of my best, most favorite memories of our book tours were in RJ Julia, and just with this incredible community of readers. So I'm so glad we can still do it virtually. I wish we could hug everybody, but we're so happy to be here. So thank you for having us. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, Mom, honestly, I'm just as proud of you, if not more. You've been such an inspiration to me my entire life. I always say that I'm so lucky that I was born not to a best-selling author, but to a beginning one. And I watched her completely change her career, build this incredible, this oeuvre, Mom, right? You're like this body of work, brick by brick, your perseverance. And that then with this book, after 31 incredible thrillers, to stretch yourself with historical fiction and just, go into something new. And I know as your daughter that you've had this book in your heart for so many, many years before. I didn't do it when you did it.
I know.
Anyway, you're great, and
you're great. No, you're great. No, RJ Julia is great.
Okay, no, this is it's not excuse me thing. But anyway, I'm just very proud of you, and we love RJ Julia.
Well, we love RJ Julia, and we love Bookhampton, and we are so happy to be here. So let's just start, and we'll jump right in. We're going to interview each other and hope that it turns out, well, it'll be real, whether or not it's professional, God knows. But Francesca, why don't you start, and you tell them what Ghosts of Harvard is about. That's like a logical question.
Always forget that part. Yeah. Ghosts of Harvard. Ghosts of Harvard follows the story of Katie Archer, who is a young woman who is really struggling in the aftermath of her beloved older brother's suicide. Her brother Eric was a genius. He was a prodigy. He made getting into Harvard look easy. And her entire life, he was that gold standard by which she always measured herself. And like I said, he was at Harvard. He seemed like his future was bright. And while there, he developed mental illness, he developed schizophrenia and struggled with it, and ultimately died by suicide. And it was just, it's so hard for her to make sense of how this, her best friend in her family, her North Star, made this unfathomable decision. His life took this turn she never could have anticipated. And I think, like so many people who lose somebody to suicide, she's haunted by so many what if questions. What did she miss with him in his final year? What went wrong? How did this happen? And she knows the answers are only on Harvard's campus. So when she gets in herself, even though she dreamed of joining him on campus, she feels she still has to go to try to unravel the mystery of his final year. And while she's there, armed only with an old notebook of his, with his sort of lab notes and a combination of scribblings and maybe paranoid delusions, armed only with that, she's trying to see what happened to him. And then she starts hearing voices herself. And then the new question is, am I losing my mind like my brother? Or could these voices be something else? Could they be ghosts? And if she listens to them, will they give her those answers and closure she craves and lead her closer to her brother? Or are they just leading her down a path of her own self-destruction? So that's the plot of Ghosts of Harvard. It is a real mix of psychological thriller and has the sort of historical supernatural elements, some spooky physics, but really at its heart, it is a family story. And because family is so essential to us.
That's what I really love about it too, because I think if you look at sort of the evolution of the modern novel, the best novels really defy categorization because they're original. And this book is a family story, but it's also a psychological thriller. And what I love about it too is that in many of books of that type, the threat is extrinsic. So a bad guy's going to hurt you. You have to run away. You have to solve a murder, whatever. But in this one, it's it's so emotional because really the threat is from within. And the main character whom I love is imperiled because of forces that she can't control that are actually within her, which I think is a very modern thing.
I hope so. I tried to write a book I hadn't read yet, but I was so informed by having read I'm a reader first, and I was so informed by reading so many of the books that, we all love, and including yours. And it was so interesting to grow up. I always just joke what fun it was to grow up with a mystery writer and a thriller writer, because our dinner conversations were the most interesting and a little macabre, where we'd be like, I was like a 14-year-old high school sophomore, and you'd be at dinner like, do you think could you die if you just fell down the stairs, or would you have to be pushed? If somebody died falling down the stairs, would you know they were pushed? Like, that was what we were debating. So I feel like I tried to, even though this book is not a Lisa Scottoline novel, I tried to keep the pages turning. You taught me to care about plot. And I feel like what my little, at least initial twist with the idea was that, I love thrillers, and I love that, but they typically, or many begin with a death, and then they ask the question of, a bunch of people professing their innocence, but one of them is guilty. In this book, it begins with a death for which there are many, many people who feel they are guilty, and so many people can trace this path of consequence toward this tragedy. And they see their role in it. And this main character is particularly haunted by what she believes might have been her, not that she did it to him, but her failure to prevent it. She's haunted by that. And she's compelled to look for the reasons, largely because she wants to try to find a reason that isn't herself, isn't her fault.
Right.
So I was really intrigued with flipping that and a lot of other different things. And
I do want to add to that I think you've been properly given credit in these wonderful reviews for dealing with difficult subjects with real sensitivity. I know how much that mattered to you.
Nothing was more important. Nothing was more important to me because, of course, it was part of the inspiration. But and then I only brought home more so during the writing of it and during my research just how many families, good families, loving families, wonderful families in this country are touched by suicide. And it's such a complicated grief, and it's such a complicated loss, and one that I think we've made great improvements over recent decades, but still have a long way to go about how to comfort one another as a community about it. And There was just nothing more important to me than people who have struggled with mental illness in their family or this type of loss, who would feel really recognized and empathized and respected in this book.
Right.
Let's take a little break, and why don't you, of Ghosts, and tell us what Eternal is about.
Well, okay. And now for something completely different.
Is that too ping-pongy?
In a way, no, that's good. But in a way, it's funny. I was going to say it's completely different, but it's really kind of not. Yeah. And I think a little bit it ties in with this because Eternal's the first, people are making a thing because it's like my first attempt at historical fiction. But honestly, I've wanted to write this forever. And I think all of my books are about love and justice and family. And this is just love and justice and family set in a different time. But Eternal is the story of a love triangle set in Mussolini's Italy. And as fascism is coming on, it's a young girl and two guys. So I got to imagine two great men and which will I choose? There's Bradley Cooper or there's another Bradley Cooper. Which has happened?
A book fell, doesn't matter.
Oh no, put up our little display. That was so nice of you. Anyway, so while this young woman is coming into her own at the same time, these are her two best friends, and it's sort of a no-win situation. Who is she going to choose? And at the same time, one of her best friends is Jewish. And as Mussolini, which interestingly, it didn't start out, fascism did not start out as anti-Semitic. Jews were very well assimilated in Italy. The intermarriage rate was 50%. The mayor of Rome was Jewish. Wow. So to sort of examine the impact of these laws on these people is something I've been doing in every single novel. The only difference with Eternal is instead of it taking place in 3 days, like most of my books, it takes place over a 20-year period. But I'm really, really proud of it. And the reaction to it has been terrific. And so I do think it's about family at heart, just like Ghosts of Harvard, even though the time frame's different. And we are different writers. Our voices are different. Our authorial interests are different. They reflect who we are. We both have curly hair. Mine's gray. So there's a lot of great.
But I also think that it's the both books in a way are about young people identity building during times of trauma.
That's true.
And my book absolutely deals with the way that, our personal traumas and our personal histories are echoed in national history. I do have a little bit of historical stuff in this, and your book, of course, is just immersed in it in this wonderful way. But about, that macro and micro of the individual and when you're trying to figure out who are you, who am I? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase that, but I think that your book is very about that.
Exactly. And it's interesting you bring that up. Now, we'll have to say that you did go to Harvard. You were a valedictorian of high school. Perfect.
Nerd alert. Yeah.
Oh. But, you still, what I love about this is that you really made Harvard come alive and made it a character and all that, but in a much more substantive way than people say that sometimes. So I know the research you did, but maybe we should, instead of talking about the research, all of it, why don't you tell them what was the most fascinating to you or surprising thing you learned in your research?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, even though I was fortunate enough to go to Harvard, I certainly never thought I was going to write about it. So I didn't really do that much. I, didn't do research while I was there. I had to do so much research after graduating, of course. Yeah, I mean, it was, I did know that, like you say, that Harvard was a character as soon as you set foot on campus. It is really a place where the past, the present, the future all collide, or all just pressing on you at once, because you have this incredible legacy. The school was founded in 1636. It predates our nation. Every building is a living memorial to some famous name. So you have this incredible weight of this history that seems just impossible to live up to. And then you also are, even as a regular young person, and I do really want to emphasize, and I think the book shows that it's just also a normal college where young people are trying to figure out who they are and trying to catch the eye of the cute guy in the English section, or maybe that was just me, and sleeping through their Monday lectures and making popcorn and burning it every single night. So, it was normal, but then it's that history pressure and this pressure of the future expectations. Oh, you think you're good at computer science? Are you the next Mark Zuckerberg? Because if you're not, we're already kind of not that impressed. And so it's you feel so lucky that you got, to some degree it's luck. It is luck. The way it's even lower acceptance rate now than when I got in, it's under 5%, that's luck. That means they could have filled the class 10 times over without taking anybody who was worse at the SATs. So you got this golden ticket if only you don't blow it. And that's an enormous amount of pressure on like having this extraordinary future. So that was such a source of the inspiration and why I was interested in those life events that create, you know, that alternate reality in our life. Like she's always going to have that alternate reality of what if my brother were still here? And what if he'd gotten to live up to his potential and the duality of the potential for greatness, potential for illness, the potential for tragedy. And so with the ghosts, there are 3 ghost voices you can decide that she is visited by. And with them, I wanted to explore different moments in our history, American history and Harvard's history, in which potential was thwarted or destroyed, because that's really what I think is the heartbreak of suicide, is that somebody, they didn't get to live out whatever we think, whether it's God or fate or the universe or their natural potential of their life. And so I was interested in exploring that, and that led me to, one is a famous person who you have to guess, that's a secret while you're reading it. You know, I was interested in war. I think war steals potential and destroys potential generations. And the other thing that I thought destroys and steals potential is racism and discrimination. So I always knew that I wanted to have one of the 3 ghosts be not a white man, because, you know, you read about Harvard's history, you would think that that's the only people who were ever there. And it was, they certainly dominated it, but that's not the case. And so I always wanted a Black woman as a ghost. And I did this interesting research. I had a totally different character for the first 9 years of
I can tell that. Okay, go for it.
Well,
yes.
I mean, you asked me what's the most surprising thing in my research.
Right.
This is the answer, even though I know I took a little bit of a long way getting into the answer.
No, it's good.
But, and so I had this other character named Dolores, and it was totally valid character. The book worked. I was very attached to her. I cared deeply about her. It was based in real history of during the Reconstruction era, and she was born, you know, right around Emancipation Proclamation, and like it was very interesting history I was very into. I sold the novel with that character. I did an editing pass with that character. And then Harvard went public with its history of slavery on campus. And suddenly I realized that even if this character worked and the history worked and all the themes played, she was the original character was sort of like this part of these weird indentured servitude maids that Harvard employed. That was weird. But if you're writing about an exploited worker, when there's a history of an enslaved person, you are inadvertently kind of sugarcoating this. You are inadvertently whitewashing it. And it was such a profound experience for me as a writer, because this book is really about that we don't know what we don't know. This main character is drawing all kinds of conclusions about her brother's life and her brother's thought process based on what she thinks is complete information. And it isn't. And I think we all do that. We all are sort of helplessly hemmed in by our own perspective. And we might not know what voices are missing. And here, as the writer of this idea, I had this incredible example where I didn't know what history I was missing, right, even though I had done almost a decade of research. So I said, time out. I want to explore this further, because there were enslaved people, not just on Harvard's campus, but in the home of the Harvard president. And it was 100 years earlier. So my character had originally been from 1880s. This happened during the 1730 to 1760, 1765. These years might start ringing a bell because that's, of course, right on the cusp of the American Revolution. While our colonial nation, you know, our budding nation, thought leaders were debating the tenets of freedom and independence, they were being served by enslaved people. Right. And that irony and that idea that you could be born in the home of the Harvard president's residence and have the least potential afforded to you in the world was so striking to me that I pressed pause. I completely rewrote the character. I completely did all new researched the real people who were lived and died there. And I incorporated that. And I'm so glad that I did. But that was a big, big curveball and a big edit. But it's the way the book was always supposed to be, I think.
Well, I love, though, that I learned that from the book. I mean, and I went through that with you. I was like, oh my God, that's such a revelation. But just the headline that the Harvard president had enslaved people in his own household.
Right.
I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And I think
and Harvard has always sort of been kind of self-important. So they kept incredible records of so many minutia, kitchen inventory. I was able to look through the Harvard archives at the genuine kitchen inventory of the Harvard president's residence, and there was almost no records of the people who lived there because they were Black. And so this was genuine. It wasn't as if it was suppressed because it was a shameful part of history. It was simply lost because at that time, they just did not, the people in charge did not think that it was worth keeping track of.
Right.
And so it's really important that we unearthed it. And I was grateful with the Harvard Archives to learn more about it. But I mean, my God, you did so much research with Eternal. I mean, how was your research experience? Did you have any surprises? I know you went to Italy.
I know, that was fun. I mean, that was great. But actually, really, first of all, let me just say, can you hear the dog barking? Tell me if you can.
Don't worry about it. We can, but it's far away. Don't worry about it.
Okay, good. Great. You know, it was interesting for me because I was basically, what sort of spurred this was that I discovered that the story about what happened to the Jews of Rome during the war is kind of untold. In fact, not kind of untold, has not been told in popular American fiction. And it's such a compelling story that not only did the fascists under Mussolini have this barrage of anti-Semitic laws, but then when Italy surrendered and the Nazis occupied Rome, they actually played this really cruel cat and mouse game. And so all these years I thought, I really want to write this. I wonder when I will feel ready to. Then I finally realized, you're ready, you have to try and do it. And one of the trips went back, you know, when I went back to Italy, I went on the 70th anniversary of this event. And so it was really amazing to be at memorial services with survivors of that time. And it really, like you felt that incredible responsibility. Like I've written a lot of books and I'm always aware that when someone dies, it's very significant. My books are not like, you know, a lot of people dying. And you really want to bring home the significance of one death. But that's a very interesting and hard problem to do when there is mass murder, like during the Holocaust. So I think that was really compelling to me. And I think on the sort of the plus side, the sort of the interesting research, it's a little lighter, is, you know, Italy is so about food and we're so about food. And I think tonight's so about food because, and then to learn sort of what happened during the Nazi occupation of Rome. And in the beginning of the novel, I had the characters eating a lot, and Elisabetta, the main character, is a chef, and she's a pasta maker, and she loves to cook, and she's a restaurateur, and one of the guys is a restaurateur. But what happened is when war started, the Italians began to actually starve because part of the campaign was destroying the southern wheat fields of Italy in the hopes that Italy would surrender, which worked. But it meant that there was no pasta and bread. And so then when the Nazis come in, they actually weaponize food against the Italians and against the Jews of Rome. And I thought these stories have not been told. And at the same time, there are little nuggets of, you know, a crusading Monsignor who basically hid Jews in the Vatican.
Wow. So that's a person. Wow. That's just such an
incredible story. About the dog. Can you hear the dog? Should I go
away? No.
Sorry, guys.
I'm interested in the Monsignor. I mean,
it's just incredible. And I didn't even know any of this stuff. And the more research I did, the more I learned. And like you have to decide, well, what's going to serve the story? Because you're telling a story no matter what. And what will underline some of its themes or inform some of its characters. And it's a really special responsibility, but I loved doing it. I'm really proud of Eternal.
Same too.
Well, thank you, honey. And I think in a funny way, we both ended up writing a little bit, you know, about when we come around to family. And I think yours came in a really uniquely personal way, a little bit because thinking about our beloved Mother Mary, my mom, your grandmother, because I think, you know, I've been with Francesca on one or two signings and the question she gets first is always, do you believe in ghosts? And I kind of love your answer to that, even though it's very personal, but this is our family signing. So I'd love for you to tell that if you can.
Yeah. I mean, like you were saying, you know, I had a pause for a moment because I never thought I was writing about Mother Mary when I set out to write this book, or even during the writing of it. But just the way writing is, where you are letting so much of your heart and your subconscious speak, you're always writing about things you don't realize. You set out to write about certain things.
That's really true.
And you discover it. And when I started writing this book, my life had been touched by suicide classmates, different at almost every single stage of my schooling, starting with middle school. And so that was really, I think, what in middle school, high school, and college. So that was what gave, weight to the idea. And I remember thinking, being, like you said, really sharpened, but weighted by that responsibility that this was something I'd experienced tangentially, but not in my immediate family. And so, to be really careful and to respectful and humble about what I know and what I don't know in my research and everything about this type of grief. Because you think that must be so different. But what we learn is that, the heart and emotions, there's always more that we have in common and more that connects us. And maybe you're right. In a lighter way, also, people ask about the ghost thing. You write a book with ghosts in the title and people go, do you believe in ghosts? And it was funny because it's I didn't anticipate that as a question, which is so stupid, but I hadn't.
Is that stupid?
No, it's a little stupid, but I didn't have it in my, when I started writing the book, I love ghost stories. I love Gothic fiction. I love the whole genre, but from a perspective of a fan and a skeptic. I also really love, debunking ghost stories. I love the shows that do that. If you're like that, this book will give you a scientific explanation for the ghost. It gives you a psychological explanation for the ghost, right? You don't have to be a true believer to enjoy this book, because I started writing it not as one. And I had never had a ghost experience. I didn't always like how they were portrayed in fiction, or the rattling chains. These are not that type of ghost. So, you can mute yourself if it's really making you crazy, but it's not. It's fine.
Go ahead. You just talk.
But anyway,
throw her out.
And then it was sad in that during the writing of this book, I lost my grandmother, Mother Mary. She passed away, and we had written about her in so many of our essay books, and she was such a big force in my life. And so we were so close. I'm her only grandchild, and she babysat me my whole childhood when I was little. So we were incredibly, incredibly close. And one of the million reasons that I'm so grateful to have this job is that I was flexible enough that when she was in hospice at my mom's house, I was able to just move home to Pennsylvania and be with her for those 4 months. And anybody who has cared for and loved somebody during hospice knows that it's every human emotion crammed into one period of time. Of course, sorrow, and of course, grief, but also comic, silly moments and stupid minutia, little moments, and just watching Everybody Loves Raymond reruns and eating Entenmann donuts because nothing matters except that you're give somebody a pleasure in their, the end of their life. And I just sat with her all day, every day, and as late at night as I could. And at some point during, when even I was laughing about, we would watch Paternity Court, which is an incredible program and so many kinds of, lots of very intellectual things. But toward the very, very end, when it felt like the grandmother that I knew was already very far away, that's the hardest time. And I still didn't want to miss a minute with her. I didn't want to. So if anything, I think I stayed up even later those nights. And there was one time that you and my uncle, your brother, were all there and insisted that I went to bed. So I went to sleep right above the room where my grandmother was. And I guess I was so exhausted, I did fall asleep. And in the middle of the night, I truly, like they say in books, woke up with a start. I woke up and I just felt like something like Velcro. You could almost hear it. It was ripping from my stomach to my throat. It just felt like this feeling. And I didn't know if I was going to throw up. I remember I rushed to the bathroom to try to throw up. I didn't throw up. I never had a physical, visceral, gut-wrenching feeling like that. And I didn't know what caused it. I was totally freaked out. I lay back in bed. And no sooner had my head hit the pillow that I heard my uncle downstairs going, "Mom, Mom." And that she had passed. And that was the moment that I felt this rending of a connection. And I think at first it was hard for me. It's still hard for me to make sense of because I had such a warm, loving, laughter-filled relationship with my grandmother. And like I said, this wasn't a warm hug. It didn't hurt, but it wasn't a warm hug feeling. But I think what it was and what I did put into this book, which is that, ghosts don't haunt us, we haunt them. We hold on, spirits hold on to one another. And I think my grandmother and I just held on until the very last second. And I felt her leave this plane, but I felt her. And it wasn't, these messages and these signs or whatever they may be, feelings, they come in forms we don't expect. They come in forms that are hard to make sense of. But there's what I learned in the physics research with, scholars and mathematicians at Princeton and theologians and cosmologists and all these different kinds of things. I learned that there is nothing that, a priest or a ghost hunter or a fiction author can think of that a quantum physicist has not already taken very seriously. There absolutely are dimensions that we cannot perceive. There's like 80% of the universe which we cannot perceive, dark matter that we cannot perceive. There are forces at play in our world that we don't understand, but it doesn't mean that they're not there. And so that's something I just want to say to everybody who, if you have any kind of experience you can't explain, it doesn't mean it isn't true. And that was something I didn't really know until I experienced it while writing this book.
No, and you're sweet to share that, because I honestly think that every novel to be effective has to have an emotional truth. And because you don't literally live the things that happen in fiction. But right. I think Ghost of Harvard has an emotional truth because that experience, informed this novel. And you can feel that emotionality, and it underpins the novel and gives it dramatic impact. I just think
I don't even know if I agree, but maybe, you know what I mean?
Mother. Right. What are you talking about?
Again, if it did, it was entirely without my power and without. Of
course it is. That's the magic. That's the magic of writing, right. That you basically, if you're really writing in an honest and open way, you're plumbing your own depths to inform these characters and what happens. And you did that in spades. I just think
it's so sweet. Well, how about, where do you think Mother Mary is in Eternal?
Well, that's easy, because in Eternal,
easy cases and think about the obvious ones and the less obvious ones.
Yeah, but I'll tell you something. I think it really goes to the point that you said of that you don't really realize it, because Francesca and neither of us really write with an outline. So you're just sort of writing. And I have this character who all of a sudden, Elisabetta is the main character, and she has a bad mom, unlike me, right? And she finds herself working for this older woman who's like a pasta professoressa, really good at pasta, and she's learning about pasta. And I found myself writing a lot of scenes with Elisabetta sitting at a table in this kitchen with this older woman talking to her about life while she makes pasta. And I was like, Lisa, that's, you lived that. Francesca lived that with me, because my mother would make homemades like every Sunday. She was a secretary.
Wait, let's pause. What's that little terminology you just dropped in there? Homemades?
She made homemades, man.
What does that mean?
Philly is in the house. It means she was making homemade pasta, her ravioli, her gnocchi. She made incredible homemade pasta.
From scratch.
Right. And we would sit around and just talk to her, because it's like a 3-hour operation. God forbid I actually helped her, right? Like, you kind of helped her a little. I never helped. I just was like,
you could only mess it up. That's what I'm according to her.
But I was like, this is interesting, because I was in the middle of writing this and I said this. And then the character in the novel is writing a novel. How meta of me. Ooh.
Wow.
I know. I didn't plan that either.
Speaking of meta, I think it's interesting that like the three of us, Muggy, not here anymore, but we're such a little chain of really close mothers and daughters, but we both wrote these books about characters who are, at least my character, I wouldn't say that my character has a bad mom at all. I don't think that's a fair judgment of the mother character in this book, but the mother and daughter have a schism. They really have a real rupture in their relationship at the beginning of this book, because they're just both handling this loss in totally different ways. And the mother kind of understandably can't understand why her daughter wants to go to the site of the worst thing that ever happened to them. Does not know why she wants to probe that painful way. And there's one of my favorite Italian proverbs that really, really inspired this book, but it's like so tomato soaked, as La lingua batte dove il dente duole. And that means the tongue always strikes the sorest tooth. And it's this idea that sometimes there are certain types of pain which we don't avoid, we can't help but probe and push on and press on and make a little bit worse. There's some sort of unwitting, a subconscious like need, drive to push on that painful spot. And I really thought that grief can be like that, and suicide can be like that. And this main character, it's like that for her too. It's not that she's callous to the pain that lives at Harvard's campus and, lives those ghosts in those between those walls. But yeah, but for me, the scariest thing would be having a break with my mom during the worst time of my life. And your main character is like, how do you build an identity when you don't have that loving mom as a rudder? And I think that's such a thing for Elisabetta. Do you agree?
Right, because not everybody is as lucky as you to have a great
That's
mom.
what I was getting. That's where I was headed with it, exactly.
Maybe we'll open it up to question and answers, and it'll be questions of like, how great a mom was I? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, was I 25?
The bestie best. Yeah.
Should we tell them that I just visited you like this morning? I was in New York visiting you, and then we came home, we both showered to look so nice for a
Yes, we did.
special thing.
You wore that sweater though. No, I love it. I love it.
How dare you?
You also wore your gym shorts when you ran away. So.
I know, I'm embarrassed. I was like, oh, that's professional. But I think it's really cool to be doing this. And I think it's so interesting to see in your novel, vis-a-vis this idea of genre. There's historical elements in what you wrote too. I mean, I love the pieces of American history, not only the racism, but there's other elements that we can't reveal. And me in this novel, you're talking about this history that to a certain extent, I thought it was really interesting vis-a-vis your book. I keep saying vis-a-vis, I don't know why. I'm trying to show off.
I didn't notice it till you said it. I'm interested in because I want to know about what you're saying.
Well, this is what I think is interesting, that, we've just come through this pandemic and we're very, very lucky. We know people who have lost people and people have fallen ill. And, but what's interesting to me is that when you are and I sort of took this approach to writing this novel, and I think you did to a certain extent with Ghosts, that when you're entering a period of history, you don't really know it. You have characters who don't know that they're in history, but they are for the reader. And in this, we entered going back to when you moved home during the pandemic, because when I sat down to write a journal, I was like, well, you've never written historical fiction. That's when I was like, you can't do it, or A, B, you should just try it, or it isn't that different. And what I had to write it from this perspective was here's people and their families. It's 3 families. It's not just these young people. 3 families starting life, the story, at the beginning of fascism. They don't know they're entering a historical period, a period that people will look back and call the Ventennio, 20 years of Mussolini's rule. And that's happened with us with the pandemic, right? Remember I was like, I think you should come home because I always wanted to come home because I'm an Italian mother. And then we were like, maybe this will be for a month, maybe, and your book came out the March of the pandemic.
But yeah. But no, I'm right. And they thought we'll push all your events for 2 weeks because then it'll be done.
Right. And I think we all as a nation went through a historical period, and there is no better education or a more horrifying education that just sort of leads you to the conclusion that history is not past, that great quote, it's not even prologue. I think in your novel, history is conflated in time to a certain extent.
We talk about time and history as such a linear causal sort of like a chain.
Right.
But I don't think that we experience it that way. I don't think we really process it that way. I think we always carry the past with us. I think we think and expect and plan for so much in the future. I think it really closes in on us in a lot of ways, or it's layered in ways. But I think what you're saying is interesting and true of both of our books, that the way that they deal with the retrospect knowledge, in your case, of the reader, where the reader knows what's happened, so we can read about and go, you have that dread of like, oh, that's its own suspense of like, we know iceberg straight ahead. We know what they're heading toward. And these characters don't know it. And we have to see them grapple with it. And I don't know, how did you grapple with that? Did you think about sort of that dramatic irony of the retrospect, like that the readers wouldn't have that knowledge? How did you incorporate that into your suspense writing?
I did, because I said they know the expectation, so you have to twist it. So there are twists in Eternal. Right. But it's interesting vis-a-vis that, because I just said it again.
Just don't sweat it. You're making a big thing of it.
I'm so weird.
I like what we're talking about. I have a different angle on it.
Oh, make with the conversation. Okay.
Yeah, that's what you say that.
Well, it reminded me of that palimpsest word, palimpsest, that I remembered.
I don't really know what that word is. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to educate you right now, Harvard, because a palimpsest is a term that applies to medieval texts when monks would write, and then they would be writing on parchment. So they wanted to write something over the top of it, but they couldn't erase it or start new. So they would wipe it away, and you could see what was underlying it. And a palimpsest is a layer of time made visible. What? So then I had that very because you see what's underneath it that was written before. And I thought that's very interesting. It's very, when you think about a real physical manifestation of a layer of time made visible, it's a generation. Hello, you, me, my mother, you see family history. We're all a part of our family history tonight. I'm a single mom. I basically always have been. It's you and me, and they're in our family. So
yeah, I think the way that
there was some point in that. I can't remember.
I think, well, I was going to say, I don't mean to jump in, but I think the way I dealt with that, sort of the power of the retrospect for both the reader, in this case, the reader and the main character are more aligned, because of course the main character is from present day. So she's speaking to ghosts who don't know they're from the past. They think they're in their present, but they're coming from these different moments in our past. And so she has that power of hindsight. But I really wanted to tackle in this book that we always say that hindsight is 20/20. I'm not so sure, because I think that gives you the power of perspective of time. But like I said, there are so many more limitations and so many more dimensions to what happens, why it happens, who it happens to, how it unfolds, than just time, than just that consequence. And you don't know what perspectives are missing. So you really don't have the full picture, even if you have hindsight. And, that's sort of that's something that's I explored in this book.
Excellent point, Francesca. Now Victoria is here. Maybe ask us some questions.
Yes, I am. I hate to interrupt. I'm absolutely loving this discussion, but we have a lot of questions coming in.
Good.
Just going to get started here. Do you, as an author, experience a different relationship with the historical characters about whom you write than you do with your own fictional characters? If so, can you describe the differences in that relationship?
Ooh. You mean a character that's based on a real history person, or just being interesting?
You go first?
Sure. I have, three, like I said, 3 ghost characters. One is completely fictionalized, but based on real type of events and real people, but is not actually based on a real person. The other 2 are based on real people. So I was fictionalizing somebody who truly lived. And that was different in that it had that weight of the responsibility, especially for this character, Bilha, who was the enslaved woman, who I just felt so much that her voice and her personhood and her humanity had truly been buried for over 300 years. And so I took very seriously that I was going to essentially put words in her mouth. And I really grappled with whether or not I should change the name and make it like a wholly fictionalized person. But I just felt that her name had been buried for too long. And the minimal details I had about her life and death were very compelling. And I wanted to honor that. Unfortunately, because of, like I said, the record keeping, her true story is lost, but the best that we can do in present day is to empathize and to imagine. It's not perfect, but I think it's important. So with that character, with a dearth of primary research documents, I, had to fill in a lot of blanks, and I took that really seriously, but she ended up being just very as dear and real to my heart as any character that came entirely from my mind. The other character who's famous, who we're not going to say, Mom, don't spoil, who is a famous person, but you don't like, he's not famous when my main character meets him. He's not who he becomes. And so he's not aware of that extraordinary future headed his way. But this person, I had an enormous amount of research primary documents because he was a prolific letter writer. And so I actually read almost the full collection of his letters during the time as a young man and a college Harvard student. And I would transcribe by hand in my little notebook my favorite phrases that he used in his letters and these little turns of phrase, just so that I could sort of get in my hands and get in my ear his voice and try to really echo his voice and even echo certain true lines of his words verbatim, but of course, decontextualized and put into my story, so that there could be as true like echoes of the real person through the book if it was indeed a fictionalized version. What do you think? What about you, Mom?
I think you said that so completely that what she said is, because we'll get to the other questions. No, truly. No,
Okay, so Lisa, this one is for you. So we'll give you this one. Do you see another historical fiction in the future?
Oh, totally. I'm so excited. I just finished the next domestic thriller. It's called What Happened to the Bennetts. It's out next March or April. But I am so jazzed. I just loved doing this, and I loved the freedom to write in a completely different time period. And like Francesca, I'm a geek too, so you get to read all about this stuff. And I don't have any more details that I can divulge, but I'm definitely going to do it again. And I'm very grateful to bookstores like RJ Julia and to readers like who are listening now, because they were you guys have been supportive. I mean, people could easily say, well, I like this and that's all I like, but that isn't what happened. My readers really came with me, and I feel very grateful for their loyalty. I really am.
Okay, this next one is a comment I just want to throw in quickly because I think it's kind of funny. This one says, loved Eternal, but remembered when Lisa was at RJ Julia and threw out mini donut packages to the audience. Good times. Did that happen? Did you throw out mini donuts?
We always listen, if you're Italian, you bring carbohydrates, man. It's
all
all
about the food. I believe that.
And I just had so much, we just have a wonderful time when we go to RJ Julia, because it's such a wonderful store and everybody loves it. And this is true of Bookhampton as well, because we went to Bookhampton together. Mm-hmm. And just that, bookstores are really special. And when there is a special bookstore, I think the community treasures it. Traveling authors like us treasure it. We become part of that community. So we were happy to bring, treats for everybody. They're Philly tasty cakes. And by the way, we always stop at Clam Castle, which is down the road.
Oh my God, I love Clam Castle.
So we love Clam Castle. So we're food people. What can I tell you? That somebody remembers that. That's loyalty. See what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Do you have a set goal of number of words you write each day when writing books? How do you stay disciplined as you write?
I learned that, you can gesture to me, Mom, but I learned it from you. My mom really did instill in me the value of a word count goal. And more than any, even just discipline, the value of the word count goal day in first draft mode is really to just depersonalize the writing process. My mom was just visiting me and I was just really venting about it. Can be so hard on your psyche and your mental, your self-esteem. Like we were saying, any issue you have in your life, in your heart, in your relationships, it's going to come up while you're writing, even if you're writing nothing about that. This is a really hard time where the blank page feels like a mirror, and sometimes it's a funhouse mirror and it is reflecting something, a version of you that's way too harsh. And so if the question at the end of every day is, was I a good enough writer today? You're going to have a lot of sleepless nights, or at least I do. But if the question is just, did I make my word count? Did I write 500 words today? Did I write 1,000 words today? That's yes or no. It's empirical. It's depersonalized. It's not a value judgment on your character. And that is like the only way that you can sort of get out of, sometimes if you find yourself stuck in a little bit of a self-doubt loop or a negative headspace. And truthfully, it doesn't matter what the word count goal is. And mine changes. Like when I'm having a tough go or I'm not quite sure about what I'm writing, sometimes it's as low as 500 a day. And sometimes 500 words a day is really hard. It just depends. You know what I mean? Like it depends on how much time you have and how many distractions. I mean, God, we had a whole year of where I know every parent was homeschooling their kid and going to work on Zooms, and like, it's hard. So make it 100 words if you want to. Or when I'm grooving, it's 1,000 words. My mom, when she's grooving, is 2,000 words, right?
Right. But the thing that we want to really say is, first off, to be encouraging, because listen, why it's hard is because I don't think you have to go to school to do it. And you just try not to be intimidated. That's why I think I love doing signings. I know she does too, because we want to talk about the process, to just keep it real and say to somebody, like, everybody was unpublished. We were unpublished. And so I think the thing about the word count is, look, you might be working a job. First 2 years of my writing career, I had a job. So I did 50 words a day. So whatever you can do, it's okay to have a wish. And the key thing is something that Anne Lamott says, which I'm sure RJ Julia has, and so does Bookhampton in Bird by Bird, which is, you give yourself, if I may say, permission to write a shitty first draft. The first draft is going to be terrible. It's you telling the story to yourself. Even if you have an outline, it's still raw. We always say to each other, it's Francesca told me the phrase, get it down, then get it good.
I didn't think of that phrase though. That's somebody else's.
Well, you should take the credit. I think it's good.
No, it's like, I mean, it's such common writing advice, but it's great writing advice, which is like, books aren't written, they're rewritten. This book went through, like I said, so many rewrites, including after I'd even was supposed to be finished, it went through a rewrite. So,
and Hemingway famously said, write drunk, edit sober. And that's really good advice, and not really literally. It's more that when you are sitting down to write, you need to get out of your own way and write freely, and then all the magic happens in the editing. You can edit it till the cows come home, but the first draft will be a mess and will feel like it. So, but still go for it, because if you feel horrible, you're doing the right thing.
It's the truth.
Okay, so this one is for Francesca. What feedback did you receive, if any, from Ghost of Harvard about the mental illness aspect of your book?
I've been really, really happy and gratified that that topic, which, like I said, I cared so much about handling respectfully, especially schizophrenia, not so much in books. I think books are always a little bit more respectful of like the pop arts, but movies and film and TV, and you see such a sensationalized version of schizophrenia, or, you see these types of, Law and Order SVU versions of mental illness. I really wanted to not be that. And I worked with a psychiatrist who specialized in treating schizophrenia in an, hospital setting. So I knew I had done my homework, but I still didn't know, or I cared about how it came across. And I've had such really touching and meaningful feedback to me about people who felt like things resonated. And even though I did do a lot of clinical type that research, the main character of this book is a 19-year-old woman. So it's not as if it's not presented as a case study. It's not presented with a place of perfect knowledge and perfect understanding. And a big wrench for this main character is that she's, of course, finding in retrospect tons of fault with how she handled her brother, but she could only handle him like a sister. And I wanted to sort of also give not just empathy in that, like, oh, I'm going to use all the most technical, appropriate, super, right, correct language. I wanted to just use the heart language, the empathetic language, the honest language, and that kind of telling. And I think that it has resonated. And I will say the one research I didn't do was I didn't interview any families who had lost somebody to suicide, because I just truly felt that I'm not entitled to that grief to write a fictional story at that intimate level. I'm not going to probe the worst loss of people's lives so I can tell a story. So I did all that research from a more like respectful distance through reading articles, reading grief books, like talking to therapists, things like that. But yet, having written it and doing Zoom book clubs, which I'm still doing if your book club's interested, but I've just had incredible, tearful for me too, conversations with people who have lost somebody in this way. And so many people have, and every experience is unique, but grief needs community to heal. It isolates you. And the only antidote, nothing can make it easier, but the only thing that we can help, heal and process it is if we process it together. And I'm so happy that I hope this book has facilitated that for readers just within their own hearts, amongst their friends. And I've been humbled and a pleasure to get to be a part of that too. Sorry.
Yeah. Definitely, it's a touchy subject to write about, and it's so real. And I think it was done so well and so beautifully. So good job on that. It was
Thanks.
very good. Okay. So now a little bit of a lighter question. I like this one. Any chance of a cookbook based on recipes in Eternal? I have to admit, I had a huge pasta craving when reading this.
Ooh.
That's so tempting. Well, what we did was, if you go to my website, you will see, actually, I did all these videos that I filmed in Rome, and they're all there. They're a nice companion. There's also a really cool interactive map, which will show you the locations. But the best answer to the question, we put my mother's recipe up there. Her, I always forget if it's her gnocchi. I forget if it's her gnocchi recipe.
Always say it's her gnocchi, and it's her ravioli.
Because of course she wrote none of the recipes down. My mother made the most incredible tomato sauce, right, honey? And we eat Rayos out of a jar, like a, Medagan. But so anyway, we put the recipes up there, and when I get them, I'll throw them up there. They won't be in a book, but it's very tempting. I love the food in this book. I love writing about food.
You always give, I would call my grandmother Muggy. You always call it Muggy. You give her a hard time about not writing them down, but what you didn't get is because she wanted to be the essential person who made them.
Oh, it's
She
true.
want us to make them without her, and I didn't want to make them without her. And even though I did figure out how to do the eggplant parm, right? I do.
Oh my God, your eggplant parm's unreal.
So I learned by watching,
I'm hungry.
which is what God intended. Learn by watching it. And the rest that the memory is richer than I could ever make it. I don't care that I don't have rest.
Right. You're right. I just wish I had.
Okay, so we are running out of time. I have two very quick questions left, so we'll just go through them quickly. Everyone wants to know what's next for both of you. So I know we had talked a little bit about historical fiction, but what do you guys have going on?
Well, I'll answer quick. The book, what happened to the Bennetts, I haven't even talked about yet, but the bottom line is it's a family that finds itself in a dire situation, and that's all I can say about it. I'll say more when I have to think about it a little bit, but I just finished it yesterday.
Wow, congratulations.
I know, I'm excited. Francesca, you talk about it.
I'm in even an earlier stage. I'm in the first draft soup, everybody. So if you're writing too, I'm there with you. But I am really excited about this next book. It's not a sequel to Ghosts of Harvard, but it's a similar genre bender. And I don't want to say like it's lighter because I don't think this book is heavy, but if this book is an examination of grief, this new book is really an examination of instinct and the way it informs love and lust and fear and the things that make, your hair stand up, that all the ways our intuition acts, the things that our body tells us that our brain can't fully articulate, but that we know somewhere in our body. I was really interested in that. And, we just had this whole year of technological connections, and they're wonderful. It's great. But we have farmed out so many of our essential needs to our iPhones. On my phone, I order my food from Seamless. I'm looking for, I've lived in the city for 10 years. I'm still navigating with Google Maps. And I'm looking for the love of my life on Hinge. What are we missing when we're missing the smell test, when we're missing that body-human connection, the animal connection? What information are we missing? And that's what the next book's about.
Very nice. Okay, so I know you guys have to leave, so I just want to ask very quickly, what's your favorite part about working together, whether it's doing these events or working for the Philadelphia Inquirer? What's the best part about that for you guys?
Well, I can say that as a mom, and I think I think any parent feels this, that what you're seeing here is just a parent's pride when a young adult child, right? When you to watch your daughter find her own voice. And that happens whether your daughter becomes a novelist or she becomes an accountant or she becomes a mom or whatever happens. That's really that's just a blessing in life. And I'm just really happy that to be here.
Yeah, my favorite is these types of events. These events and the wonderful events we've had at RG Julia in person, and I hope we'll have again in person, because it's so great to get to have a mom who gets a creative career. She wasn't holding her breath for law school. It's nice. It's so wonderful that as an adult, we get to connect over books and readers and like reading. And I don't even mean each other or each other's books. I mean other books, and just engaging with books and being such a big part of our lives. And so that not only you're not holding off for law school, now you're not holding out for a grandbaby to relate to me over that. It's like, yeah, I'm taking my time, but I have this baby and we can talk about this baby. And it's, it's just, this past year has made me very grateful for my family and for my parents, even if I am an old broad now. So.
Well, this has been so great. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. This hour has been absolutely lovely. we have so
I missed unmute and then I got
I'm out.
Sorry.
That's
Irish goodbye, Mom. Yeah.
Well, thank you both again so much. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Do not forget to purchase a copy of both Eternal and Ghosts of Harvard. They are both such great books. You do not want to miss out on reading these.
And also supporting RJ Julia and Bookhampton. Yes. It's so important. If you want them to exist, you have to buy things there. It's
yes, exactly. So links are so easily found in the chat. You could just click right on those to be brought right to both books. We do have signed book plates while supplies last, so make sure that you get those purchases in. Thank you all again so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Victoria, thank you so much. Take care of each other, okay? Everybody stay safe.
Thank you guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.